Good afternoon. My name is Ludwig Brunner. I'm the Executive Director of the Regina A. Quick Center for the Arts. And I welcome you and thank you for your attendance today for presenting this most important project, Out of Darkness. In 2013, Buffalo area artist Gary Wolfe debuted an exhibition of his work that was 2 years in creating. The primary goal of the project was to raise public awareness of the plight of persons who were homeless through portraits painted in a technique that captured not only the vulnerability and social alienation experienced by these individuals, but also their human dignity and the hope to which they cling. We are happy to be able to bring the exhibition back together to present it to a new audience in Olean and for St. Bonaventure University. I would like to personally say I think I view this exhibition on 2 separate levels. First of all, it's a fantastic, spectacular art exhibition. I think Gary Wolfe is an extremely talented portrait artist. And then, of course, there's the social aspect of it, which the artist and our guest, Carmen from the Met Urban Hope Center in Buffalo, will explain how this came about. Our thanks, of course, go to Mr. Wolfe, to all of the portrait sitters. Some of them we are very happy to welcome here today. For St. Bonaventure University, I especially have to thank our Assistant Director and Curator, Evelyn Penman, who brought this to campus and worked so diligently with Gary Wolfe. Thank you, Evelyn. I don't see her at the moment. She might be hiding somewhere behind the column, but thank you very, very much. Before I introduce the artist further, I would like to welcome Alice Miller-Nation, Director of the Franciscan Center for Social Concern, who will tell us about the creation of a new food pantry here at SBU.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I feel so fortunate that I got to be a part of seeing what goes into bringing an art exhibit to a gallery. I knew nothing about it, and it's been delightful working with Evelyn and working with our students. St. Bonaventure is having a grand opening of a food pantry here on campus. It's surprising to many that 25 to 30% of undergraduate students nationally struggle with food insecurity. And food insecurity meaning they just don't have adequate food. So we're starting a food pantry that will open up on Wednesday. It will be in the McGinley Carney Center for Franciscan Ministry, room 114. It'll have hours, morning and afternoon. I've been asked if we're taking donations. Absolutely we are. And as this exhibit's going on today, or this gallery talk is going on today, we're getting a refrigerator donated to us and will be brought in there, and we're hoping for a donation of a freezer so that our students and our campus community can also have other than just shelf-stable food for them to enjoy. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for your interest in just looking at life from a different perspective. Many people know about the Warming House, our soup kitchen that is in downtown Olean, but sometimes it's easy not to see the people who are right before us. So thank you very much for coming and for being here today.
And now, without delving much into the background of the artist, because I think his paintings speak for him itself, Mr. Gary Wolfe.
We already have a tech problem, so let me solve that first, and it's solved. Okay. I'm so thankful that you're all here today. I'm so thankful that I have an opportunity to address you. I'm so thankful that I have an opportunity to see all my children again. because many of these pieces were purchased. And so I want to thank those who are the owners. Some of you are here today. Thank you for loaning them back for this exhibition. And put your hands up, by the way, if you own a painting, and so people know and they can come up to you and thank you. So I'm going to kind of give you some context, but first I'd like to introduce the other folks that are up here. Another thing that I'm thankful for is that they rode down with us and we had a chance to chat and further develop our relationships, many of which began around this painting project. To the far right is Peter Warren, and Peter delivered and wrote a wonderful article for the catalog. There are catalogs outside. You can take a look at his article. And then next to him is Warren McGilrath. You can see Warren's painting in the back. And Warren is a great Bills fan, so he is here at great sacrifice. Next to Warren is Karen Carmen. Karen was my collaborator. She worked and ran the Matt Urban Hope Center, which provided services to persons who had been homeless, particularly chronically homeless. And she and I will be talking back and forth regarding this project and that population. And then Ludine Doratis is next to Karen. And we got a chance, I learned more about Ludine driving down here, and the last time we went to lunch together. So, and they're each going to share a little bit of their story and respond to some questions. But I did want to set some kind of context about how this project came to be as far as I was concerned as an artist. The work that I had created for the last 8 to 10 years had started to represent for me what was called a journey inward and a journey outward. Now, this moniker is not original with me, but I felt it was appropriate for the course of my work over the number of years that I had done this. Journey inward and journey outward reflected to me a rhythm of life, a dance, an ebb and a flow. My gosh, we see these patterns all around us, don't us? We're doing it right now. We're breathing in and out, in and out. There's such a presence in the journey inward, journey outward. For me, it became the experience of vulnerability and the discovery of compassion. Let me talk a little bit about the journey inward. In 2010, 2011, I was asked to participate in what was called the Anne Frank Project on the Buffalo State College campus. And that is a project that addresses issues of justice and genocide. And it started with a presentation of the Diary of Anne Frank with 2 Anne Franks, one Jewish, one Rwandan. And both of them were addressing the third wall, or fourth wall. I participated in that project, and what I developed was called an installation entitled The Child Inside. The installation represented partially my interest in combining video, the kinetic image, with painting, the static image. It's composed of 7 panels that stand and are supported by little kindergarten chairs. And then, 6 are supported by kindergarten chairs. The 7th hangs on the wall. And you can take a look at them. On one side is painted this rather ghostly adult, out of which a child in full color is emerging. The child inside. And these sit in a circle, much the way we sat as kids in a kindergarten circle. And I've encouraged people to sit on the chairs. This was one of the seminal works that had the ghostly figure of a homeless woman and the child that she may have been. And this was the panel that hung from the wall. And what I did is I took the Super 8 footage that my father had shot of me as a little child, And I had my son go out with a video camera and shoot me doing the same things in the same places in similar clothing, and then I sandwiched them together so I was there with myself at the same time. So time was collapsed. And you'll see a video of this show, which ran at the Niagara Community College in Niagara County. And so there I am. Let me just say one more thing. The inspiration came from a number of places. I used to go in crowds like this, or with other artists, or in church, and feel like I was the child and I wasn't in the know. I felt marginalized. I couldn't understand this feeling. I wasn't part of the group. And my father was an alcoholic, somewhat verbally abusive. And when I got into an adult children of alcoholics group, they talked to me about writing to the child inside that was wounded, to journal and express some of the feelings. Then I went shadowing my daughter in high school. And you know, when you do that, you go into the high school and you have to sit in the desks while the teacher, who's much younger than you, looks at you. And I'm saying, all of a sudden, that whole social dynamic returned to me. I was the student again. I was the child. And then again, there's this scripture verse that says, "Lest ye become as little children, you will not see the kingdom of heaven." So all of these things were kind of playing on me. The wounded child, the dependent child, the joyous child, the open child, the vulnerable child. I started to descend inward into my own vulnerability as a child. The interesting thing is that feeling of being a child amid adults started to go away after I did this piece. I found something. So here's a little picture of the show to give you some sense of that. Give you an idea of that work. Part of that show, you know, I had been painting children at the moment of birth, that blank slate, that time when they have not been affected by the world. And I painted two paintings. One was called Abel, and the other was called Cain. And this was part of the show at Buffalo State, and I hung them on opposite walls. And these two young men came in, and they looked at them, and they saw Cain first, and they said, "Oh, that's cool." I mean, these guys, hair straight up, tattooed on all places you could see, and they were an interesting couple of guys. They get around to painting of Abel, and they look across, and they say, "He's shooting him. He's shooting him." They had a sense of that Cain and Abel story where Cain kills Abel. It started to make me think, what happens? How does a brother become an other and an enemy? This is what drove me to the journey outward. I needed to find out. I needed to touch base to the community where there was pain, where there was marginalization. And it was very matter of fact. Karen's husband was my art history professor, and I would go over and talk with Karen and Chuck, and we started talking about doing a series on the homeless, and Karen and I started just getting very excited. I don't know if it was wine, Karen, or if it was just, we were just very excited. But we talked about this idea of her acting as a liaison to connect me to some of the people that she was working with at the Mad Urban Hope Center. And let's see the Mad Urban Hope Center. There it is in Buffalo, not far from the old train terminal. So we worked with the Mad Urban Hope Center and with the Restoration Society's Harbor House, and we'll give you a picture of that. That was a drop-in center in downtown Buffalo. Not a sleepover, but just drop in. And so Karen gave me introductions to the folks who had been or were chronically homeless in the city of Buffalo. And you want to say something about how you felt about me connecting?
Well, at first, I was very cautious. Every single person that you see, all their portraits on the wall, I know all these people. And I know that their stories, and I know that their stories are very rough. They've been marginalized, often looked aside, stepped over. So the last thing that I wanted was this project to have a negative impact on them in any way possible. I know Gary, I know Linda, and I know that those are the people that would never do that. So I had to put my faith in them, and I was not disappointed, and it worked out very well. I mean, and Gary got to know, he didn't only paint their picture, he got to know them and got to know their story. So there was a tremendous connection there. And you can hear it from, Warren and Ludine, that connection was sincere. So,
well, we interviewed everybody and heard their stories. I took a number of photographs of everybody, and then I paid them because they were collaborators and models. And I asked them one question: what would you say to the rest of us who are not homeless? And each of the models gave an answer to that. And those responses are posted next to their portraits, if they indeed did give the response. And I painted from the photos on tar paper, because tar paper was gritty and it was made for building homes. The other thing that I was interested in is reducing the commodification of this work. And so in the initial show, I arranged to have 30% of all sales that referenced the 30% of persons in poverty in Buffalo to go to support the Hope Gardens, which was a 20-unit residence for chronically homeless women. And Karen helped write the grants and spearhead getting Hope Gardens built. Do you want to say a couple words about Hope Gardens and some of your experience with that?
Sure. Well, Hope Gardens had been on my mind for probably 6 to 7 years prior to starting to write any grant at all. And as a grant writer and a program developer, I did a lot of research for this. And chronically homeless women were often looked over in the homeless community. It's usually homeless women and children. We think of homeless men, but homeless women, chronically homeless women, remained virtually hidden. Very little research done on them, so we collaborated with the University of Buffalo to pick up a study. And while Hope Gardens was being built, the study was conducted, and we engaged with the unique needs of chronically homeless women versus the men. The women would often hide in abandoned buildings. Shelters did not quite fit their needs because they would be hypervigilant at night from being attacked on the streets. Most of the women that I worked with were sexually assaulted on the streets. So it was a very unique need, and there was really not many places just for them. So Hope Gardens, it was about a $5 million project, and we did ground up. It's still running beautifully, 20 units. And so we do a lot of soft programming. A lot of the women that are there, they have disabilities. They've been homeless for many, many, many years. And they're now in permanent supportive housing, and they're doing very well. And Gary's part of the proceeds from this project went to some of the soft programming at Hope Gardens, things that HUD will not cover, things that New York State would not cover. So we were very appreciative of that.
I had worked for County Human Services for many years, and I wanted something special to happen at the first opening. And so I reached out to all of the connections, the politicians, the power brokers, the advocates for the homeless, the artist community, my friends, families, neighbors, and invited everybody that I could. Now, understand that this show was supposed to be in August 1st of 2013. In September, the Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology began its construction, which took the gallery away from me because construction was impacting the Art Space Gallery. In fact, I had already sent out the invitation cards and had to send a second card that said, "Uh-oh, homeless show is homeless." And I got a lot of press from that, ironically. It said something to me, however, about the journey, that whatever happens to you in the midst of the journey, when you feel it may be negative, it's sometimes behind that is a different way that you're to move. And so it came about that we had the show starting November 1st of 2013. We had track lighting put in the gallery by the Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology that would not have been there, so it was a much better venue. And we were up for 2 months, from November 1st to New Year's Eve. And at the opening on November 1st, when we had all these folks, Karen said, "Well, I'll bring the models, and they can stand by their painting." And they did. And all of a sudden there was this dialogue that doesn't take place in the streets, doesn't take place in the office buildings, with people that don't usually interact with one another. And I don't know, do you want to talk about that dynamic and how it felt? Anybody, Ludine, Warren, how did you feel about that opening?
I felt that it was a little touching because I had tears in my eyes. And to me, I really appreciate the whole program, the people that's contributing, spending their money on us. I really appreciate everyone. I wish I could turn my life back around and start all over again. I burnt bridges that I hope neither one of you ever will burn. I've been homeless. I was homeless for over 30-something years, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It was a journey I never want to go through again. Never.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you.
Never.
Amen.
You will. You will.
I'm out.
You've got a home now. You're good.
Yes.
You're good.
Let me tell you one more part of that show. So, I'm getting to you, Lee. You're good? One more part of that show is I'm getting older, and I had friends that are older than I, and we were sitting in a coffee shop, my dear friend Priscilla, and we're sitting there, and I had decided to have a closing reception. It was New Year's Eve, wassail and cookies, and, to bring people in once again to the show. And I said to Priscilla, "Are you going to my closing reception?" She said, "Your clothing reception?" And I went, so we decided to send out through Facebook that we would be collecting clothing because it was a particularly cold winter at the reception. We still had the wassail and cookies. We collected, 3 to 5 cars full of clothing for the Hope Center. In short notice on New Year's Eve. So, like I say, this journey has been absolutely amazing. Not only personally as an artist, but also as a human being. Let me show you some of the paintings and give you a little bit of the story. This is Raheem. Raheem is back here. I just found out that Alex Blaze, who loaned this painting, has now donated it, and it's been accepted by the Roswell Park collection. They have their own collection of paintings, so that was just selected. But Raheem was a teenager. He was a junior in Riverside High School when his stepfather asked him to leave, and he was on the street. I don't know how long, Karen, before you guys found him. 4 years. This is a teenager. And Raheem has had his struggles, but he did get his GED, and he did take some courses at ECC. I have not been in touch with him for a while, but I know the last time I saw him, he was at a party at the Hope Center, I think a Christmas party. This is Katie. Karen and I went to the Restoration Society one night, and Karen would screen people and ask them if they want to participate, and then I would talk. Katie had been beaten up the night before. This is the Band-Aid on her chin and the bruise on her head. She was reluctant to participate. And she says, my life wasn't supposed to be like this. I did everything right, and look what happened. It was interesting. This piece was purchased by the Birchfield Penny Art Center, and I was so excited that I put it up on Facebook. And a musician in Buffalo started saying, oh, that's Kathy. That's Kathy. And told Kathy's sister, who lived in Lockport, and Kathy's sister called me and told me more of Katie's story. Katie was one of 5 sisters who grew up in Elma. Katie was a great field hockey player. And she had a sense of, an anger problem, but she became a trucker, a teamster. Unfortunately, that anger problem and some alcohol led to her losing her family. Her husband took her son and moved to Texas. And then Katie went and lived downtown and was on the streets. Her mother never considered her homeless. And so I'm learning all of this, and her mother sends me a letter and tells me some similar facts. So I sent a catalog back to her mother. Oh, you need to know that a month after the show closed, Katie passed away. And the mother sent me the letter, I sent her the catalog. Katie's sister called me back and said, Mom received the catalog. She never thought Katie was homeless. This is the first time she's cried since the funeral. Suddenly, that connection between me, the artist, and Katie and the family became, how can I say, more intimate. This is Joanne. Joanne worked at the Hope Center in the clothing room, and she was very, very excited about going to the opening. Unfortunately, she was found murdered in her apartment a month before, and she was unable to go. She says, try not to go homeless. The winter is brutal. Do what you have to do. Try to understand others' plight. People have their own things going on. Who did show up at the opening were her 2 grandchildren and her daughter. And they pinned a little note on the wall of forgotten faces in remembrance of Joanne, whose portrait is also over there. This is Joe. Joe's first question to me when I walked into his apartment, which the Hope Center had gotten him, is, are you a cop? And he was a little distrustful. And then when he found his portrait was going to be done, he started orchestrating it exactly how he'd like it, with a tree outside with a bird on it. And I think he liked it. I don't know if he ever saw it. You know, he didn't come to the opening, but maybe he got in there.
He saw the print that you
Yes, I gave him the print, yes. But Joe, had spina bifida from birth. And so it didn't matter if he was disabled or had a disability. He found his way to the streets for some reason, and you may know his story better, Karen, than I. I don't recall how he got out there. No? This is Phuntsok. Phuntsok is Tibetan. Phuntsok's story is interesting. Phuntsok was in India, and there was, at that time, a lottery for people to come over to the United States, and Phuntsok won the lottery and came to the United States and was in Minneapolis, St. Paul, working in a hotel in the laundry room. And for some reason, that job was no longer there for him, and he thought maybe he could go to New York and find a job. So he took what he had and went to New York City and could not find a job. Then he's asked friends, is there work in Canada? Yes, there's work in Canada. So he got on the train and was stopped in Niagara Falls. And they held him there for an hour and then said, you don't have enough money to go into Niagara Falls. And he said, what am I going to do? I'm homeless. And he says, oh, homeless. Well, there's this service center for the homeless in Niagara Falls. They told him how to get there. The intake worker said, fine, come on in. We can do this and this and this for you. He was there for 3 days, and then the supervisor came in and decided, you're not homeless, you're a tourist. Gave him $2.50 for the bus and said, go to Buffalo to the city mission. And Phuntsok, in his Eastern self-deprecating way, says to me when I'm interviewing, I must confess, I bought a beer. Well, he thought that Buffalo was not that far because it's so close to Niagara Falls, so he somehow got out over the North Grand Island Bridge and was walking on Grand Island, and he said to me, there were houses on one side and jungle on the other, and I was afraid somebody come out with a gun. So he dialed 911, and it was 911 in Minneapolis. And they connected him to Grand Island somehow, and of course 5 police cars come out on Grand Island. And he said they put me over the car, but they were nice. They gave me money. They put me on the other side of the island. I went to Buffalo. He said I went to the city mission, but I couldn't stay there. They take my stuff. It wasn't nice, so he was out on the street for a couple years before. He was working with Restoration Society. He said, I can't sleep there, but I can put my head down. The lesson is, be careful if you win the lottery. I'm blocking. Jessie, thank you. This is Jessie and her cats. When we went to visit her, she had 2 litters of cats. She loved her cats.
She had 17 cats.
17 cats. You cat lovers, you're saying, what's wrong with that? I love Jessie. Jessie would always flirt with me. And she could speak like a sailor, I would say, yeah. And Jessie did go through the Hope Gardens and is now in an apartment on her own. I wanted to show you Jessie and Phuntsok. This is when they were next to their portraits. I also wanted to show you, now I'm going to take a little sideways and say, for the artists among you that are interested in how these paintings get done, you paint on tar paper? Well, yes, I kind of do a pencil drawing on tar paper, you know, and then I start working with oils. I found out very early on that the oils and the asphaltum interacted, and so I needed some kind of a barrier, and so that's when I started using encaustic, which is pigment supported in wax. And so this is the oil painting, and then I start to put on the encaustic and refine the image. And my final layer is oil with a palette knife. And it creates this kind of unique three-dimensional feel for some of these paintings. And there we are, Jessie out of darkness. This is Patricia. Patricia said, It ain't no joke surviving. And this is, as Karen said, women will find places to hide in or live in or stay in, and this was the place that she had stayed in. Many of the models took me to where they were staying on the street. Patricia was a veteran and a nurse. And is she still at Hope Gardens? Is this Tamberley, a safe place? The piece that Evelyn chose to represent this show. And this is the bridge that she would stay under during the day. This is Arthur. I like his message. Don't give up. Don't give up. You know, there is such wisdom from the streets in these messages. I hope you take time to read them. This is Dean. Dean is no longer with us. Look out for people. Everybody's supposed to help each other, you know. And this is Ty. Ty is the poet. Listen to his words. Common sense goes a long way. There is no fear in love and no retreat in war. My tears are my food. You shouldn't put so much faith in that car and that money. Material things go away quick if you put your hope in it. This is the wall of forgotten faces. I thought I'd try something a little different aesthetically using these shake shingles and the tar paper. And I started to work with two other men who had been homeless, and they became co-artists to create this homeless camp with rocks and cardboard and blankets that people could lay down in, sit on the buckets, etc. So this is Dean, and this is Jeff, but he went by Gnome because people have street names. And I wanted to have people respond to the statements that all the models had made. So I encouraged people to put little Post-it notes and pin them to the cross and the wall of forgotten faces in response to the statements and to start a dialogue and to provide some encouragement. This is Ludine. Ludine said, "Don't judge because it could happen to you." It sounds almost biblical. And this is Warren, who says, "Never burn any bridges. Never get on your family's bad side. Never lose trust in people. That way you'll always have somewhere to go." And Peter wrote a lot more words that I'd love you to read. And it's basically a message from Peter on what it was like to be homeless, and that's available in the catalog. I have these slides at the end because I want to start with some questions for Ludine and Warren and Peter. And then we can open it up for questions from y'all. So, Ludine, why don't you start? Could you share a bit of your story on how you came to be without a home?
Well, sorry, nervous, don't do crowds. I grew up as a normal, typical teen in a normal house with a pool. I ended up becoming homeless because my adopted mom by love her husband had a family emergency and they had to move to Maryland, and I was not able to go at that time. I had both of my kids. I had gotten pregnant at a young age. Don't do that. Any of you other young, do not. And I was not able to go. At that same time, I had found out that I was not a citizen in the United States. So in Florida, if you're not a citizen, you don't get help. You don't get to get into any of the shelters because you can't work. And if you can't work, then you're homeless. And as a mom, a young mom, I had to make that choice to send both of my wonderful children to Williamsport, Pennsylvania with family. And because my adopted parents, my adopted mom, who's now 89, she was living in a apartment complex for elderly, so she wasn't willing to move or able to let me live with her. So I was out on the streets for about almost 6 years. Well, if you add up here, about 6, 7. A friend of mine who lives up here found out that I was homeless and was living in a place called Tent City, and I tried to play it off because I don't want her to worry, but someone ratted me out, and she told me if I didn't get to Buffalo, New York, she was coming down to drag me. So I made it up here. My kids were only 4.5 hours away, and I figured, well, I can move up here, get my citizenship, work on getting my kids, and hopefully get a home. And I ended up homeless up here a little bit, stayed at Salvation Army, and then I ended up getting in connection with the Hope Center. And I've been with them ever since. That was in 2010,
Probably.
around there?
Yeah.
So yeah, 2010. It's been a while. They gave me my first home, and the first thing I told Miss Karen was, this is how this is gonna go. I will accept your help, but I'm working on getting my kids back. And she looked at me and goes, well, we'll see. I proved her wrong. I made sure, and I got both my kids back.
We were
And-
all rooting for you.
And I also ended up getting my citizenship. So all in the timing, with their help and their rooting for me, I was able to get my kids a home, and now I actually have a house through them. So
She also had jobs.
I did. I was
Yes.
working on
She
Burger
was
King. My first job was
She
Burger
was
King.
such a hardworking woman. It's been
Peter,
wonderful.
would you chair?
Did you?
No, Peter?
Okay. If you look around, everybody on these walls had a much more difficult life than mine. So my life was pretty charmed until 2007, when I had a stroke. I had 2 of them, and when my sister came to help. My sister was an Air Force colonel, and I'm a civilian, and there's a good reason for both of those things. So she came in and she decided what was best for me, and that was to go into a group home. And I was not keen on the idea at all, just in concept. And when we went there, again, charmed life. I look at this place, it was probably adequate. I mean, probably even pleasant for most people. But for dinner, they served us white bread. Bless you if you like white bread. I don't mean to disparage, but it's just not to my taste. And after dinner, there was a social hour. That's what they called it. But it's a misnomer, because you sit and watch television for the hour. And if you could choose the television program, I suppose that would be fine. This was a 1-hour special about a young woman in Hollywood who was having a difficult time. I felt badly for her. Her parents seemed to have been unprepared to guide her through the perils of fame, and they were in it for their own fame. And I wanted her to be happy the way I do everybody else on the planet. I didn't want to sit there for an hour listening to it. I couldn't do it, so the group home was just not for me. And at that time, my sister was adamant, I was adamant. My option, it made perfect sense to me, was to go live under a bridge. And so, like everybody else here is it seems to me, homeless by circumstance. I look back on it and I think I don't know what I was thinking, because I was kind of like homeless by choice, and I would still be there if it weren't for the Hope Center, because before I had volunteered, I had contributed, I had made charitable donations. I'm not the recipient of that. I'm used to trying to do some of that for other people, So when I ended up in this situation, it never occurred to me to seek out any help. And when the Hope Center was established, it was Karen, Carmen, and a woman named Joy. When Joy came and asked if I wanted help, I said, no, thank you. She came the next week, no, thank you. No, I would still be there if they hadn't been more adamant than I was. What, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going off the question. Should I wait until you ask them? Okay.
Yeah, just.
He gave us 5 questions, and now it occurs to me that you were asking number 1.
Yeah, that's
and
all right.
I've moved on to number 2.
We're going to go with the flow, Peter. You're
Okay.
flowing, so flow.
So I lived under this overpass for 5 years. And as I said, I would still be there if they hadn't insisted that I come into the program and be helped. And so question number 3 was, how did the Hope Center help you? It got me out of that situation, which was wonderful. But more than that, if you think, it not only restored shelter, it restored my life. Because if you think of your life, you have your life and it's going in a path, and it doesn't make sense until you look back at it, how you got there. Decisions and circumstances change and everything. But you can see that there's a path. Homelessness severs that. You have your life up until that, and it seems to be leading you over here, and then you're homeless, and everything's different. You're cut off from what you were before, and you feel cut off from what you could have become otherwise. So not only did the Hope Center get me inside, but they got me connected to the life that I had led before, in a way that I thought I was going to do on my own, and now I realize it just was beyond me. So question number 4, how did participating in this portrait project affect you? My contribution is words, so it's anonymous in a sense. To give you a sense of the opening, the space for Gary's opening was bigger than this, and it was packed. I've been to many art openings. There was an energy to this. People were there not because, oh, this is fashionable, not because this is the cool place to be tonight. They wanted to be there, and they were engaging with people. The models were celebrities. They were getting their pictures taken. They were being asked for autographs. They were having conversations. Nobody knew who I was. So none of that applied to me. What did apply to me, though, was that before all of that, when everybody else was in the spotlight, before I had been a newspaper reporter and then a copy editor, and then that quit when I had my stroke. This was the first time anybody had asked me to do anything that was related to what I used to do. And so in 2 senses, it was completely unlike anything I'd ever dealt with before. There was no deadline pressure, just please write something. And there was no editing. I turned this in, and I was kind of apprehensive about what was going to come back, and nothing ever did. It went into and what's in there is what I wrote. If it's edited, Gary has a very light touch, because it allows me to sit back and think, yes, I did that. So with all the improvements, I still think that they belong to me. But what it did was it tied me back to the work that I had done before. And I'm still not to a point where I could do it, because in those circumstances you have to work quickly. I'm not capable of that kind of speed. But this introduction that Gary asked me to write was the first time in like 6-7 years that somebody had asked me to do something that related to the life that I had before. So they restored shelter, but they more importantly restored me to a connection to the person that I was before. A connection that I didn't even feel that I had lost until it had been given back. So it was wonderfully invaluable for me. And then, so number 5?
We'll wait till number 5. We'll wait.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. But thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Warren, would you tell us a little bit of your story, how you came to be without a home, and how the Hope Center helped, and how long were you said 30 years
Yeah.
homeless?
Well, some of my story, it's a very sad story. It was rough for me before I became homeless. I had a dad that was an alcoholic, always accusing my mom of cheating on him which she worked 2 jobs to take care of us. All his money went to alcohol and other women. I never told my mother that he was cheating. I never did, to her death. And I regret doing that. But the alcohol became so bad that that they separated. My father left my mother and went and lived with some other people. And my older sister, she had her 2 kids. She moved out. She moved and got her own apartment. And my mother could no longer handle the bills on her own. So she went and stayed with my sister. And because I had a little problem, I burnt the bridge. I had went to the store and I took something out the store without paying for it. And ever since then, my sister didn't want me to stay with her because she's thinking I'ma steal from her. So that left me in the streets at about 17 years old. That's how it started. That's how I became homeless, right there. That was it.
When did you connect to the Hope Center?
Well, when I connected, the Hope Center, wow, okay. I went through Blizzard of 7. I went through Blizzard of 77, living in the streets, nowhere to go. I had a pair of sneakers on, no jacket, just a sweater. Just a sweater on.
It must have been a very tough time.
Okay, I went to my cousin. I went to my aunt's house. She let me stay with her for a few weeks till after the snow, till after the blizzard of 77 come manageable. Okay, then from there, I went to live with my brother in Lackawanna, but he was too bossy, and I couldn't stay. So I left there. Went to the city mission. I'd rather live in the street than stay at the city mission. That's how they treat you. You come there to eat, they put you out. That's like being homeless there. They put you out in the street there. You come back for lunch. After lunch, they put you out. Then you come back for dinner around 4:30 or so. Then it's time to go to bed at 7 o'clock. I know neither one of you go to bed at 7 o'clock. So I left there, and then I was going to it's a place called it's a soup kitchen called Friends of Night People. I went there, and I met a lady named Joel, and she introduced me to Matt Urban, and that's how I became home. This was after 33 years of living in the street. Can you imagine? You hoping no kids come in these empty houses playing with matches. You know, I was afraid each and every night. I'm sneaking in people's garages, sleeping in people's cars, on people waking me up in the morning on their porches. And then one day I was at Night People, and this lady came up to me and said, "Are you homeless?" I said yes. I said yes. She said, Can you show me the house where you was living in? I told her the house, the address, and everything. And then the next thing I know, I went there. I went back. They said, come back and we gonna help you. We gonna help you. It took them about a month. I was thinking that they wasn't gonna help me. That they was just telling me this to lift up my spirits, but they was telling me the truth. In 1 month time, they got me a whole apartment. I was so glad. It was empty. They asked me, do you want to wait till Mondays so we furnish it off? I said, no, I stay and sleep on the bare floor. That way I don't have to worry about nobody putting me out. I could come and go when I get ready. People, it was hard out there. It was so hard.
So Warren, one of the things that you told me when we were talking the last time about your new place, what do you got? What do you got that you're loving?
Oh, something that I always wanted and can't nobody do. I always got my own porch in my own backyard now.
Warren, thank you for sharing. Thank you. So, when Dean and Noam were working with me as co-artists, we went to lunch, and they started talking about what it was like to live where they were on the streets. And all of a sudden they were talking about, oh yeah, there was this guy that used to clean up the homeless camp. He was the neatnik. And then there was this guy who was kind of just grumbly and you didn't want to deal with him. And then there was this other person. And all of a sudden I'm saying, these are the conversations you have after church or around the water cooler. And I came to, I think, a spiritual realization that there is no they. There is no they. This is us. This is all of us together. I found a quote from Thomas Merton that I thought I wanted to share with you because we were at St. Bonaventure that kind of underscores that. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th, now Muhammad Ali Boulevard, and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, Thomas Merton writes, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. This changes nothing in the sense and value of my solitude, for it is in fact the function of solitude to make one realize such things with clarity that would be impossible for one completely immersed in other cares. My solitude, however, was not my own. It is because I am one with them that I owe it to them to be alone. And when I am alone, they are not they, but my own self. They are no strangers. If we could see each other that way all the time, but this cannot be seen, only believed and understood by a peculiar gift. I hope you were gifted today. God bless you. Thank you.